When people are saying, I want to do this and this and this, but I want to find balance, they're talking about everything's at 100, right? And they're all on a scale. And it's like, but wait a minute, that's not how it works, right? You only have so much capacity. If you've ever seen anybody take a stratospheric horizon, you'll realize that it's because they had laser-like focus, right? Our energy, you know, if you look at it as a light, right? A lot of people will basically use it as a flood. So they've got all of this energy going out in every direction. Got 10 different businesses. I'm doing all this research and stuff. Your brain doesn't want to believe your mind's a liar. So whatever belief you put in your head, your mind is going to constantly work to validate. That's how belief systems work. Your beliefs become your reality. If you believe that focus is hard, your mind is going to work constantly to make sure that is true.
All right. So this is Uncovered with Derrick James. I'm joined with Chris Waldron today, who is an executive coach and one of my really good friends. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. This is super exciting to get to do with you. Launching this thing, I'm excited to be one of the first guests.
I'm definitely happy to have you, man.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start right. We'll just start, man. Can you talk about what exactly is executive coaching?
So I am an executive coach. I'm an executive accountability coach, which means I work with founders. In short, I take amateur founders because they don't teach you this stuff in school, and I turn them into professionals. So the outcome of that is essentially I turn entrepreneurs that have started a company and doing hard things, and I make sure to turn them into basically machines that are turning their visions into absolute realities. So it's a lot of intense work, but it's also extremely rewarding to be able to work with so many incredible people.
What type of people do you work with?
So I work exclusively with founders and entrepreneurs, CEOs, and also I do work with some COOs as well when it's applicable. So operations side, but primarily founders and entrepreneurs. Essentially, the zone of people where you've struck out and decided to create your own value in the world, and you haven't been taught how to do these things because they don't teach it in school.
Yeah, I remember when before we met, I heard about you before we met. I've been sharing with someone who works in the same space. We share the same shared office space, and I remember speaking about needing some sort of entrepreneurial coaching. I think I called it at the time, and someone mentioned you. So what do you think is when you're talking to these entrepreneurs, what is sort of what brings them to your door, so to speak?
That's a great question. So I get people. There's two types of people I'll get generally that fit really well. On one hand, you have someone that is really good at hitting their numbers, really focused, but they need someone on their side to basically be kind of like a non-equity partner, right? Someone to war game things with, someone to make sure that they're staying on top of their sales, on top of their team building, on top of just their general growth. Those are fun because someone's already hot on the path and they're making sure that they're maximizing everything they're doing. The other side that I get very commonly is guys that are basically overwhelmed with everything. They don't know which direction to go. Maybe they've built something that's taken off and seen some success, and they're totally freaking out. Like, what do I do now? Right? I need to hire people, or I need to expand my team, or I need to figure all these things out. And like I said, there's no training for this. So you walk into a business and all of a sudden it gets successful. There's a lot of things that break immediately. There's no systems in place. There's no processes in place. There's no checks and balances in place. And I'll get founders that are in that state as well and come to me like, hey, I need help. I need someone to work through this stuff with, and also just be on top of things week over week. And it's really two parts. One part is a lot on the business and strategy because of my experience in business, and the other part is psychological because, again, there's no training out there for this. So a lot of the work we do is reconditioning the mind to make sure it's set up for entrepreneurship or running a company in general, where your input doesn't equal output every day. And that's a hugely important piece of it. Is we're trained young from school, from work, from all of our traditional environments that, hey, if I do something, I get something back out of it. If I do my schoolwork, I get a gold star. If I go to work for 40 hours this week, I get a paycheck. And you get to the entrepreneurship world, and what happens? You do a lot of work, and you get nothing back.
Nada.
No feedback.
Yeah, man. That's why I was even interested in initially just wanted to talk to you because, generally outside of this conversation, dude. I mean, it's we talk all the time about.
Yeah.
I'm a fairly new entrepreneur, and I came up from the 9-to-5 system, and it's just you put in so much, and I think it's cumulative still, but the day by day struggle of just burning the midnight oil, and then the next day saying, "Damn, I have to do it again."
And you got nothing back.
You got
no
nothing
money.
back.
You got no feedback. Nobody cares until you've made a lot of money,
Yep.
right? Everybody's just like, good for you, and you're out
Mhm.
here. And worst of it, I think, is community too, because again, it's such a rare thing to be an entrepreneur, to be a founder, and most of these guys don't know other people like them unless they've gotten in groups or they're really experienced and they've found people along the way. Like you said, you're out there by yourself, and then who do you turn to? A bunch of people that don't understand where you're coming from. I don't get why you're doing that anyways. Just go get a job.
It's like the Spider-Man meme. Just like you,
Yeah.
you have a question, I'm pointing to myself, like, dude, you got the answer.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's it's entrepreneurship is for me. I have a public relations firm, as you know, and I have the studio that we're in right now, and it's just the dope thing is having an idea, and then literally one day, you burn the midnight oil long enough, you put enough hours, and it becomes something that is crazy. Like when I walk into this room, and even us just sitting at this table, I'm like, this was in my mind, this was in my brain, and now we're here. Do you find that like, do you? I guess you don't really deal with people who have the vision. You deal with people who've already executed the vision, right? Or you?
I work with both visionaries and integrators, if
Okay.
people are familiar with the term. So visionaries are people that are like the ideas people that don't really get deep down into operations. Integrators is the counter to that. If you've ever seen partnerships go bad, usually this is why. It's like having two sides, two yins or two yangs.
Yeah.
You have to have someone that is focused on the future of the company and someone that's focused on how we get what we need to deliver now done. That's a big disparity, or a big classification that stemmed out of EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System, but it's very useful. So I work with both visionaries and integrators. I'm familiar with both sides, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I do work with visionaries. I don't work in the area where people are basically looking for their idea or starting out. To work with me, you have to kind of be in motion already, because I can't decide things for you.
Gotcha. Yeah, man. It's just funny. I see business as I'm not saying I'm a visionary, but I have vision, right? So, but my issue is the operations part. It's like, well, damn, I can go out and buy the furniture, I can go out and do the marketing and do the whole shebang. But it's like, well, how do you create a sustainable business, and then how do you scale it? I mean, and I think a lot of people need help with that. So, what are you? You talked about entrepreneurs being elite athletes. I thought that was really dope. We had the conversation we had prior to this podcast. Can you elaborate on that comparison?
Absolutely. I love this as a concept. I think this should be a well-known idea out in the universe. As an entrepreneur, you're absolutely an elite athlete, and if you do not treat yourself like one, if you don't take care of yourself like one, you're going to get surpassed by other people that do. We all have this glass ceiling of our needs in life, right? So your basics, your food, your shelter, etc. In our psychology, it's built in that we don't want to expend extra energy, right? So if you are religious, a couple thousand years, but in reality, like a couple million years worth of biology, right, says that, we want to spend as little energy for the largest amount of reward, from way back in the day, right, when it's like we've got to go hunt our own food. We might not eat for 30 days. So you come to like modern day and you realize why entrepreneurship's so hard is because at the end of the day, I only really need to work to a certain level, right? If my level of need is only at $100,000 a year, why am I going to expend all this extra energy, stress, et cetera, to go get some massive number, right? It's extremely difficult. If you're going to be capable to do that outside of the psychological changes that need to happen there, like you have to be in a peak state often. And so I'm a firm believer that every entrepreneur should see themselves as an athlete and treat themselves as such. And what does that mean, right? Number one, it means being very regimented and very routine about things. You wouldn't want to know your favorite quarterback is eating Taco Bell the night before, drinking alcohol before like the Super Bowl. especially like if you're betting on it and things like that, right? You'd be like, aren't you taking care of yourself? If you get injured, aren't you going through to the proper doctors and doing the proper routines and following through with those, right? Aren't you exercising to make sure that you have enough energy for the game? Aren't you eating properly so you don't experience this brain fog and you're not dealing with health issues appropriately? Every entrepreneur should look at themselves as an athlete, especially, you and I both very familiar with men's health, post 30-year-old being 30, right? It's so important to go get blood work done to make sure that like your hormones and everything are in check, because as you age, your natural energy dissipates, but so that your brain fog goes up, you're missing certain things. And honestly, if you're over 30 and you're not checking in on those things, you're working at a disadvantage pretty consistently. And it's like, why? This is already hard. Why are you making it harder? Yeah. Right? Not to mention it's just good for your life, period. Yeah. Like now you have a greater reason.
Dude, at 30, when I hit 34, 35, no, 36 actually, I don't know, sort of post-pandemic, and I thought that my lack of energy, my low energy and my just lethargy in general and just my lack of motivation had to do with like, just having come out of, this pandemic. But I'm like, I think I'm just old. And I mean, it's just, and it's real. You hear about it. And then when you actually get to the point where, you are trying to balance, family and work and entrepreneurship or whatever. And it kind of sneaks up on you. All of a sudden you get 35, 36 and you still feel, you think like a 20-something-year-old, but your body's like, no, dude. And I'm still in the process of trying to figure out like what should be my personal routine. So, I get up really, really early. I meditate, I pray, I go to the gym. Then I come back, eat, spend some time with the kids. But then I work until 1 a.m. And there's I figured out the morning routine, but not just sort of the life routine. So like, what is some advice you give to people who are really trying to get at it, just trying to go get it. And it's just like, have this vision, have this dream. Yeah. And they're burning midnight oil. Yeah. Every single night.
Burning midnight oil might not be the greatest choice. So there's no such, one of the important things is like everybody talks about balance. There's no such thing as balance. When people saying like, I need balance, they're trying to get an outsized result, right? So you have, call it 100 units. When people are saying, I want to do this and this and this, but I want to find balance, they're talking about everything's at 100, right? And they're all on a scale. And it's like, but wait a minute. That's not how it works, right? You only have so much capacity as your balance. So if you really want to focus in on business, right, and you want to increase that above its level, what has to be sacrificed, right? And where's the level of importance, right? Is it time with family? Is it your health? Is it your family and friends? Is it, your own personal hobbies and habits and things like that? What's getting sacrificed? There is no area where all these are at 100%. It's literally impossible, and that's what stresses people out. So you have to find an appropriate balance based on what your goals and desires are as a base. In terms of like daily routine, here's the thing about burning the midnight oil. There's a huge hustle culture right now, and it's been pushed by YouTube and the Gary Vaynerchuks and all these guys who have, by the way, teams of assistants to do most of their stuff, right? Like they're supposed to in business, but they push this, you got to grind. And for all intents and purposes, like there is an area where that makes sense because they're trying to motivate people that are very lazy into work. And in order to get them into the middle, you've got to be very polarizing. But the net effect of that turned out to be that everybody thinks it's like, I got to put in 14 hours a day or I'm a loser. Yeah. And the thing is like you have a certain amount of prime working hours every day where your mental capacity and physical capacity are at its peak. And for most, that's like 6 hours of like actual work, right? When people say they work 8 hours, it's more like 2. But you have a certain amount of hours. And after that point, right after that peak efficiency point, things start dropping off. So if you started working at 8 a.m. and you're pushing hard, like really pushing all day, once you're hitting that afternoon and once you're hitting into that evening, you're working at like a lowered efficiency level. Yeah. And it's like, what actual effect does that have on the rest of your life? If you're working at 50% capacity for the next 4 hours, something you could have done in 2 the next day, right? And with a clear mind, like would it have been more valuable to go home and recover or spend time with your family or be in a better state for the next day? Yeah. And I'm not saying this is a one size fits all, but part of the work that I do is really figuring that out for people in the sense of like, we don't want you to have to work 14 hours a day in the first place, right? As a founder, like that's a bad state for you. There can be a couple things wrong. You could not have the right amount of clarity in what to do. So you're not putting things together that are analogous, right? So you're stringing things together that are very similar and getting work done more efficiently. Most of it's based on like systems and processes and teams, right? Like, why aren't we leveraging human capital? Why aren't we leveraging systems capital to make sure that a lot of that excess work is getting offloaded? Because you have, as a founder, as a CEO of your companies, you have a talent that is, let's say, worth $500 an hour, and you're out here doing $20 an hour work. Right. And meanwhile, you're losing money actually every hour that you're doing that work because the $500 an hour work is waiting. Right. And it's sitting on the sideline, and there's opportunity cost that's lost with that too. And that's part of what you have to look at when you're learning to be efficient is where's my time placed and how can I leverage systems and people to take on things that aren't actually something that I need to be doing day to day.
Yeah.
And people want to believe that they're the only people that can do everything in their business, and that's just simply not true.
It's delusional. I'm delusional. I definitely I struggle with being able to hand things off because it gets reinforced by actual like evidence, right? Like I've hired some people to do certain things, and I'm like, bro, if you send me another chat GTP response to like the assignment that I asked you to do, I could have just hired ChatGTP, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a whole nother, like that's an emerging thing with hiring, especially when you do these white label outsourcing things.
Yeah.
But I had an issue back in 2022. So I started my business in 2020, my public relations firm, and it was during the pandemic. But it was popping because there were so many opportunities because of certain political things that were happening in the world. And so I went from one client to like, literally I had one client 1 month, and the next I had like 7 in 2 months.
That's awesome.
And I was working. I was, I'm telling, it was just me. It was me, myself, and I doing everything. And I hadn't made the transition mentally to say, dude, you can't be self-employed anymore. You have to have a company. And I refused to hire anybody because I simply did not trust anybody. I didn't trust anybody to put in the amount of work that I needed to, that I thought was necessary to maintain the company. But obviously it was a lie. I was telling myself. I just was a control freak. And entrepreneurship showed me how much of a control freak I am. And I went about a year without hiring anybody, literally having 7 or 8 clients at a time. I was doing a actual political congressional campaign. Why? Which is in itself, people like lose their families when they do that, right?
Yeah, insane work.
Doing that, and I was having, I had these 6 other clients, these 6 other corporate clients and nonprofit clients, and I ended up losing all of them. It was one of the hardest things I dealt with in my life in 2022. Because I had just been, now granted, there were some didn't have the budget, other things were happening.
Yeah.
I felt like the universe was like, dude, you need to sit your ass down and recalibrate.
Yeah.
And within a few months of I kind of had a break. I had nothing to do for like 3 months. And that gave me the opportunity to say, dude, look within and say, be a little bit more introspective. And I made a decision to actually try to find other talent. And that has been the key, man. Just like, I don't need to be, there's certain things, like you just said, I don't need to be doing, with all due respect, I don't need to be doing $10 an hour work or admin work when I'm trying to get more business. And I think that's a challenge a lot of entrepreneurs have, is like understanding when they need to take that leap, or figuring out, hey, even if we're not generating revenue, maybe I've hired maybe I hire someone an intern. Yeah. But I know so many entrepreneurs that just have the issue.
Yeah. I'd say, the great thing to know is like your experience reflects that of many too.
Yeah.
And I think the coolest thing about like hearing your story about that too is because it mirrors mine, and it mirrors so many other entrepreneurs, and the fact that like entrepreneurship is an evolution, a lifelong evolution. So when you meet real entrepreneurs, success, fail, any of that doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, like, I'm out there trying to create a value in the world, right? And like, I know that I don't know how to do this, but because it's a lifelong thing, I'm willing to learn, right? Hiring sucks. Hiring sucks. Hiring is the most complicated problem for every company in the world. Apple, Google, Microsoft, their main problem is always human capital. It's always hiring, right? And that's why they pay such high salaries and get nap pods and 5-star chefs and all this stuff to try to attract people, because talented people are hard to come by, because you're competing against a lot of other people, right? So it's notable that even at a low level, new entrepreneurs starting out, or people that are young in their companies and trying to build teams, like, it's a really hard challenge. You don't even have near that amount of stuff to offer. Yeah. And I've hired plenty of poor people. I mean, of the clients that I work with and the founders that I work with, half of my week is talking about like hiring issues, because there is no, one-click method. Yeah. And like you and your story, it's like, you didn't do that at first, and it's an evolution. You learn, hey, I need to do this, and you might have some bad hires, but you've got to build the trust over time, and it takes time, but it's always worth it.
Firing, or what I do is I'll give an assignment. I'll say, hey, I need this thing, and it ends up being a page long of email. And I'm like, you know what? I'll just take it. I've already done it basically in this email. Dude, you talk about state management. You were talking about diet, and obviously like not being an NFL player and drinking alcohol before the Super Bowl. And it's my experience of just seeing other people, our friends. We have some, the guys who we know, the people who we know who are doing really well. They take care of themselves, and they also have a certain this mindset of I don't know, man, like positivity. So I have, I come from a place that isn't necessarily, aren't a lot of affluent people. And so when I talk to some of my, my buddies back home, and, and they're asking for advice on starting their, their business. And I'm like, dude, I'm insane. I'm not the one. Work 24/7. That's my advice.
Giving advice is tough.
The one thing I always note is that, especially living where we live now, and meeting guys like you and other people, you hear that, money is energy. Money's not, it's paper, but it's energy. And I think I think it's true, but I also think it can be explained fundamentally on the state you're in determines what you attract, whether it's a mate or, good or bad things happen in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that I found that personally that when I'm doing my routine, when I'm getting up in the morning and I've slept 7 to 8 hours, and I'm doing everything I need to do for my mental health, it almost doesn't feel like I'm working. And it enables me to extend myself beyond what I thought I could extend myself, because it's fun and I'm in a good state. Do you find, and I don't know if you can talk about it, when you think about your clients that you have, the people who are actually doing really well, who still need your counsel but who are doing pretty well, do you see that difference in like how just sort of their state of being and how they operate, and
for sure,
how that measures this?
I mean, there's people that are new that have really great attitudes on life, and there are people that are well down the road and have horrible attitudes. So I think that's very subjective on the person. But state management is one of the massive things that I work on with every entrepreneur, including myself. I've spent well over 6 figures on personal development over the past 15 years. Of that, the most important thing I ever learned was state management. By state management, we're talking about emotional control, ultimately, right? So our abilities to manage the state of which we exist in all the time. Yeah. And what that means in simple terms, well, I'll back it up with the principle that I think is really important. So nothing in the world means anything until we place meaning on it. And yes, that's a complex statement, but think about that for a minute, what that really means. It could be raining outside, and you and I are sitting 4 feet across from each other. You could think that's the worst day in the world. I could equally hold at that same time the thought or the belief that it's the best day in the world, right? And it's because of our personal choices and our personal programming, how we see the world and what meaning we place on words and actions and things that happen to us, right? And when you start understanding that, like, your life experience is completely crafted by you, however, most people are doing this autonomously and subconsciously, so they don't understand what's going on, the moment you start understanding it, life can change very, very quickly for you, because you at any given moment are actually in 100% control of how your life is going. And I don't mean to trivialize people that have major challenges. I'm not saying it's easy all the time or necessary, but you really do. You get to choose what things mean. If you walk out on the street, and I hate to be negative, but it's like you get robbed by someone, yes, most people will be sad and upset, and I would too. I'm not saying I'd be like, oh, there's no problem here. I love giving that guy money, right? But the reality is that's still a choice.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes that is the right choice.
Well, explain that. How is it? What you mean that's a choice?
That you choose how you respond to that situation.
Respond.
Yeah. You choose how you feel about that situation ultimately.
Yeah.
Right. And where this applies in entrepreneurship, and I have to do it every day too. I don't always have great days. I have bad days sometimes. But what if I have a bad day on a day that I'm getting on with 4 founders who rely on me to be that voice of positivity, that guiding light? I have to realize and understand where my emotional state is in that moment, and I have to put myself in a state that's empowered and ready to go do that at any given moment. One of the other big things I always use it for is getting on big stages. For most or anybody that's been on big stages, it's nerve-wracking, right? Yeah. But before I go up on stage, I go through certain processes and certain thoughts, right? That's like, at the end of the day, I'm here to help people. I'm not worried about judgment. I'm not worried about how many people. It could be 1 people, it could be 1,000 people, it could be Jeff Bezos, it could be the president of the U.S. At the end of the day, like, I know what I know.
Understand what was going on anyway. But.
Sorry, shuffling around in the background. Yeah. Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, it's like, what does this moment actually mean? Yeah. And like, what are all the feelings I'm feeling? Do they actually apply here? And are they going to help me get the result that I want? Right. And in a moment, I can go from I'm scared, afraid, anxious, right, to, hey, I'm really excited to get out there and I'm really energized. One of the concepts that I love, and it's great for kids too, you realize that pit of your stomach feel that you feel when you're anxious, you ever realize it's the exact same physical response you get when you're super excited? Yes. Right. And like, think about just that minor flip when someone's anxious and they're feeling it. Right. Yeah. And they can't get out of it because their head's stuck there because they feel it in their stomach. It's like, is that anxiousness? I was like, could that be excitement for what you're about to do? And that's state management right there. Right. It's like, let's retune what this means and we're going to get a lot better result. This is not something you can learn overnight. This is very complex because we haven't learned this for some people until right now. Right. But if you practice that over time, you can craft every day to start as good as it's going to get, right? And that, the more often you're in that beautiful state where you're energized and you're empowered to go out to the world, you're going to get a better result, bar none, right? Who's going to get a better result? The guy that wakes up and says, man, I've got to do all this work, or the guy that gets up and says, I get to do all this work. Yes. Right? And that's the way I choose to look at things in my work too, is like, I get to go do this every day. Right, I get to come to this office.
That mindset shift is profound. I mean, I'm a person who would wake up and immediately open my phone and see my to-do list. And then my life became a to-do list. And I was obsessed with time to the point where if someone, if I'm doing something in the middle of the day and like someone's like, hey, I just wanted to say, hey, what the fuck do you want? Like, I'm like, that's my first visceral reaction in my head. Yeah. And it literally kept me from having friends because I'm like, I don't have time. I have to finish this assignment. My whole life became a to-do list. Yeah. And it took me hearing something like this, what you just said about, sort of shifting from I have to I get to. And it took a lot of, it took death and all sorts of things happening in life where I just started really being appreciative and having gratitude for the day, for that I get to just, I'm awake, I'm alive. I get to do this thing, and these people that pay me to do this, let's just get it done. So I struggle a lot less with that, but I noticed that mindset shift that permeated my entire life. So it became like, man, I don't feel like putting the kids to bed because it takes an hour and a half. To wow, I get to have these little moments with my children at this age. Yeah. And this is the only day this day is so unique. We're never going to have this day again.
And it's so short. Kids are such an easy target, right? Because it's like, we have small kids. I have a small kid. That's one of the easiest areas. It's like the moment you're frustrated as a parent, you remember that like one day they're not going to care that much. They're not going to want you to lay in bed. They're not going to want to tell you all the little trivial things that happen at school. That's gone, and you're going to miss it. Your entire life will pass you by if you live in that type of state where, hey, I just have to do this thing. Life's an experience. Yeah. You can make it what you want. You can make the choice to do that, and that's your prerogative. I personally don't surround myself with people like that because that's toxic. I don't need to see it. You know, and I want to be around people that think similar to me and that like this is an opportunity that we want to capitalize on, right? Yeah. I only get one shot. Why not make it something worth living and make it beautiful rather than be in misery and live in that state and stay there?
And talk about, man, toxicity and just that's, I mean, I'm still going through this sort of process of, man, it sounds like, you know, it feels assholey to say like, I need to get rid of certain people and things and also places in my life, but you have to. And it took me opening up my eyes to see I was walking around, I was suffering constantly because of something I love to do, which is work and build a business. But I realized that a lot of my day, anytime I was wasting time with people I called friends, it was because a lot of the conversations were just low vibration, low vibrational conversations. Yeah. You know, it's just complaining, and you take on that energy, and then, you know, as a friend, you try to give it sound advice, but then you leave that conversation like, dude, I've been telling you to do this thing for the past 7 months, and you've done nothing, and our conversations are just me just giving this advice, but then I'm leaving feeling like, well, maybe I need to reassess what it is I'm doing, and it makes it sort of, the energy kind of sticks to you, and it permeates almost your entire life.
It gets drawn out of you.
And it gets drawn out of you, yeah. And that's why I think gratitude, man, it's the attitude of gratitude. Obviously, it's people say it now. It's kind of a thing, obviously, but it's fundamentally, it just makes sense, and it works. An attitude of gratitude will take you from not wanting to get out of bed to, you know, can't wait, you know, to get up in the morning.
Yeah. I think the friend thing is super interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like friends as entrepreneur, you know, when you're in your business career, how does it work with friends and family?
I don't need no friends.
Yeah. Well, so you do. Like I said, this comes up so often. Here's the deal with it too. One of the biggest things that like people continue, like when you get together with your old friends, if as an adult, what are you really talking about? Stuff from 10, 15 years ago. It's the same stories, right? Yep. You're not out making new experiences. Yeah. You're just talking about the old stuff, and you're doing it because it's familiar. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. People, and this goes for family and friends, and I get that this isn't super popular to say. It's not super popular from the people that still want to be who they are and don't want their friends who are in business to move away from them, which is the majority of people, right? So that's why I say it's not popular, because anybody that needs to hear it, they'll get the impact. You're not dumping people, right? At the end of the day, you're growing, and you're going to want to find people that are growing at the same speed and in the same direction as you. Yeah. So it's not that we're like, you know, you hear all the, oh, you're not loyal to your friends. It's not that I'm not loyal. At the end of the day, we're just growing in completely different directions. This happens in relationships too. And the thing is, like, as an entrepreneur, like we talked about earlier, you're trying to get outsized results as an average person, right? You need all of your excess energy. I am ruthless in cutting, and I learned this from a friend a long time ago. I am ruthless in cutting people out that are just energy drains, that just aren't really well aligned. That doesn't mean I'm a robot, right? It doesn't mean I won't interact with. So I'm not some arrogant guy that thinks I'm better than everybody. It's just a matter of like, if you're the type of person who we title them assholes sometimes. What? Assholes.
Assholes?
Right? The guys that ask you questions constantly, never do anything about it. We call that an asshole. I move away from people like that. And the biggest power that I have isn't engaging or isn't telling someone what to do. It's not my place to say, hey, you know, you're not going to do it. That's your life. You take care of you, right? Yeah. You just won't hear much from me anymore because like I direct my life towards the right energy, the right type of people, the people that are growing in those states as much as possible, because it's not only helpful to me, but there's a network effect that's at play there too. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that, you know, like you said, oh, have that idea too. And I know you're joking, but they have that idea that I don't need friends. And because I'm just busy, and it's like, but you do. You need the right friends.
You do.
And I can't stress the importance of having a network of other entrepreneurs, because those are going to be the only people in the world that really understand you. And holy heck, you're going to get a point of growth where you need to leverage that support system at every single stage. And hopefully your family's on board with that too. So a lot of people have bad family. And again, the family guilt holds them there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like you've got to move and focus your life on the things that are going to help you get to where you want to go, or you will be crushed by it constantly. And the sad part is like, that's stuff you choose to. So there's nobody to blame but you at the end of the day. Yeah. If you've chosen to stay there and hang out with those people because you don't want to move on or you don't want to be seen as a jerk, you get that life. And that's up to you.
I think too that what it takes to be, and I'm not even saying a successful entrepreneur, but what it takes to be the kind of person that says, I'm going to make a life-changing leap that is going to upend everything that I have in my life now, and could potentially be like almost like threatening when you talk about the health impacts of like just the grind. It takes a certain type of person to do that. And I think to me, it takes an empath. And I think naturally, at least for me, it was one of the hardest things I had to do was like really look and examine who was around me. And when I realized that I was giving more advice than I was receiving, as a matter of fact, I couldn't even ask for advice because they just either it fell on deaf ears,
just didn't know,
or they didn't understand. I realized I had to really make a change, and it has really been fruitful in my life, man. So but yeah, you're right. It's just like socially, it just seems like you're just being a jerk, but you got to change your frequency, and I think it starts with what is the information that you're putting in your head, from what you're reading to what you're watching to the conversations you're having. And I think it's super, like to your point, it's just super important to like really examine. So what I do now, I examine everything every 6 months now. Like from what am I eating? What are my sleeping habits? Who am I talking to? How many times have I had the same conversation with this person?
Yeah.
And I realized very recently that there are people who I call friends that don't know anything about me.
Yeah.
Because they never ask. And I don't get the opportunity to talk about my shit, right? So
yeah, you just end up moving on. Like you said, people, your perception is like, you look like a jerk. And it's like the people that think that you're a jerk for moving forward in your life and doing something for yourself and your family is bad, is because they're fearful that their life, their certainty is changing and it's outside of their control, that they're losing you because you're moving up and they're not.
Yeah.
So of course they're gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. But again, that's up to you to interpret. At the end of the day, if you care about that, then you can stay where you're at. But like you can choose to be like, I'm not saying go and tell everybody to F off and go home. Right. I'm just saying spend your time putting effort into finding the right people, fostering those relationships, because they're critical as you grow. You need that support system all across the board, at home and at work, and it's massive, and it's all things that you choose and direct.
And then once you do that, it's like you can't become those people. Like you have to, at least for me, I've had to humble myself, because if I'm trying to move on and move up in my life, and it's not just about work, it's just about, to me, it's about energy and my state of well-being. Once I started meeting people like you and other some of our mutual friends, I'm like, I'm the brokest person here. And I had to like humble myself and not become the person that the people I was running away from, and open your mind to learning and realizing that you don't have to, there are certain things you're going to experience as a person who's trying to start a business or whatever, has a dream or a vision, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But it's almost like reading a book. I don't have to experience certain things if I can talk to you and hear you out and hear some other stuff. And I think that's like the next level, is like, how do you get to the point where you're not becoming that person, but then also you don't want to be a person that's like networking friends, right? And so it's a weird balance, right? And it has to happen organically. And I think it goes back to energy. If you're putting yourself in a state of mind of positivity and gratitude, those people are going to just naturally come into your life.
And you're trying to find friends at the end of the day, right? Yeah, I think people go, you're right. Like there's this networking thing. It's like, I'm just networking. It's like, I don't do that.
Yeah.
We have events here in our office that like, and I'm just not.
I'm good.
Yeah. I don't have a business card, and I don't even know how to explain it in a short amount of time anyway. It's like, I'm always looking for, and have found over the years, I have a big network that's like international, et cetera. That's all entrepreneurs. That took a lot of effort to build, and like everybody can do that over time. if you're focused not on going to these events and these meetups and things, looking for your next business idea or your next tactic, but you're looking at making friends, knowing that if you go to this founders event or this business event, that like these are normal people trying to do something difficult like you are, right? So just like any other room, yeah, they might have a great business that makes $100 million a year, but if I can't hang out with that guy, I'm never going to call him.
Exactly.
You know, I'm not.
Yeah.
What's the point, right? I learn from everybody that is in my network, but they're all great people. And there's a lot of people that I met that are great business people that we just didn't see eye to eye, you know, and it's at the end of the day, like that's okay too.
Yeah.
You know?
So when someone comes to your door, so to speak, are there certain things that just like every single new client just deals with, and you know that that's just part of your spiel? Like, you know, you're going to have to solve this particular problem.
The number one people come to me and say is a single word, and that word is overwhelm. People say, I'm overwhelmed.
Preach.
And I got a whole routine bit on this. There's two very distinct words that I hear. One I hear much less, which is the word overloaded. The distinction between the two it's a very hard line. Overwhelm is very common. Overwhelm is when you lack clarity in what you have to do. So essentially what happens is you feel overwhelmed because you have a lot of things and a lot of demands on your time, but none of that is very clear to you. You might know in abstract that you've got a lot of big things, but there's nowhere that's really listed out, because if it was, the only thing you'd be focused on is your next priority. But instead, what happens is rather than just having the weight of that next priority on your shoulders, all of everything you have to do from now to 6 months to a year to every situation that's even outside of your control is now a big foggy weight that's on my back. Think like Atlas, right? Now I'm carrying the weight of the world on my back because I don't actually know what's up there. I'm just taking the whole house with me because I know, all this is on me. Yeah. Let me carry this day to day. And the follow-on to that, right, what's on the back end of overwhelm? It's like stress, anxiety, it's exhaustion. And it's like, sure, take all that off your back first, right? You've got to get a sense of clarity on what you're doing and what your actual priorities are and how to execute them to relieve a lot of that pressure. And you see that word start to dissipate. The other end of the spectrum is overloaded. And that just simply means that you have more work than you can handle, that you generally probably know what it is, right, and what's next, but there's too much of it.
Yeah.
That's more of a delegation problem. That's more of a systems problem.
Yeah.
That's less of what I see. People feel that pain and seek out coaching or support or advice when they cannot see that thing on their back, right, like Atlas, but they are feeling that crushing weight. And they don't know which direction to go, but they know that there's got to be a way out of it. So that's like a number one thing people come is just they're outright overwhelmed. They use that language. And the best thing is we all are very unique people. Every entrepreneur, almost every entrepreneur and founder I talk to, I mention the same thing, that, you think that it's only you dealing with this.
Yes.
But the reality is like, it's not just you, it's everybody. And that's good to know. You're not unique in that sense. So you're unique as a person, your character, but your problems aren't really that unique.
Yeah.
And that's really good to know. And that provides a lot of comfort, because if your problems aren't unique, that means the solutions aren't unique either. That means they exist and they're easy to deploy and to fix these situations. So if you're in a point where you're like, it's just me, like there can't be anybody in the world feeling this weight, like reach out and ask and watch how fast you find out that like that's not true.
Yeah.
That's a belief system that's limiting you in everything you do day to day, because you've trapped yourself, right? Because it's comfortable to feel, hey, my problems are so unique that the solutions are unique and hard to find, so I have the right to feel bad about myself. And that's the number one way to meet all of your emotional needs, is just start feeling bad for yourself, right? You feel comfortable. You don't have to do anything. You can get attention for that. But it's like you're not going to move forward at the same. Those two states can't exist together.
Yeah. With all this being said, I mean, it's kind of a shift in the conversation, but I know so many business owners, successful or just, you know, financially successful, or just folks who are successfully running something that is working, who are addicts, drug addicts, alcoholics,
Yeah, self-medication.
Food addicts, or workout addicts, gym addicts. Why do you think?
Self-medication at the end of the day. That's just that escape,
Yeah.
right? If you don't have a proper channel to manage that, and I would never judge anybody. Everybody's got their own thing. I would like to think that I don't have anything major, like who knows what it would show up as. Don't drink, don't do drugs, don't do any of that stuff because of health reasons, right? But that's generally people's way to cope with the world, is just to exit it, right, for a moment. But the thing is, it's so fleeting. If you've crafted things properly, if you've really taken a hard look, which requires a lot of hard change, which you mentioned earlier, right? It requires massive shifts. It requires you being bold and going out and being brave about making massive change in your life to get on the right track. You can live a life where you don't need to self-medicate and escape the reality. You can set your life up and design your life in a way that, like, it's like vacation every day. I don't feel like I work every day. I don't ever get exhausted with the work that I do.
Your skin's so clear, bro.
That's that 7-point skin routine, actually. Nope, just simple wash every day. But it's such an interesting thing, and I know it's a hard concept for people to grasp, right? Because they're like, it's easy for you to say. I started the same way as you, right? Everybody. Like, I started as a baby. I didn't know it. It's not like I came with a chip implanted in me and I know this. And I'm not saying I'm the tip-top expert on this stuff either, right? I've learned it from others. But it is true. I've changed my life in massively dramatic ways that I won't go over today, that put me in a place where I get to live my life every day, and that is so exciting to look forward to. I don't need to self-medicate. I don't look at Friday and Saturday as like this is my escape from the work week. If anything, that's just planning time and recuperation time, right? And recharging and time to spend with my wife and my son and our dog. But that's not the case for everybody. And I think it comes down to just a level, two things: education, and number two is just will. The will to and the will to go out there and actually create those changes and stay with it long enough that you're creating new habits, new routines, and really designing the life in a way that's like, I'd rather be here than anywhere else, so I have no need to escape. I'd argue that the gym isn't a net negative, but there probably are some people that.
But there definitely some.
There's probably some people in there 6 hours a day every day trying to escape something.
Yeah, I'm the one that's in there for 3. It's sick.
Yeah.
Dude. So I've been hearing. We had this whole little era of soft. What is it? So quiet quitting. Mm-hmm. And now I'm here. You got the soft life thing. I don't know if you heard of soft life.
No, I haven't.
Basically, it's
educate me.
Lazy people. No,
I
shouldn't say that.
So just a new
soft
phrase.
Life is the idea that, like, and I don't want to get it wrong because I haven't adopted it in my life, but it's the idea that, like, we have gone through a pandemic. We are experiencing geopolitical issues like uncertainty, wars around the world. Like, how many are there? Conflicts that are basically wars that we don't define as wars, cyber wars that we don't see but that are impacting our infrastructure, and the idea is that because of all that's happening, there's trauma has resulted from it, which is true, right? We know that, like, the drug use and alcohol use went up and is almost sustained since the pandemic. Suicides went up, mass shootings, all that. But so this is idea that, like, there's so much going on that I have to live a deliberate, soft life where I am not, I'm not working longer than I have to work. I'm not going above and beyond. I'm creating a new self-routine and self-care routine and taking it serious. I think a lot of it comes from Generation Z, and I think we're both millennials. So it's nice to look at. I think the kids will be okay, as they say, but I wonder how all of this fits in terms of creating a new crop of people who are founders and entrepreneurs. I say entrepreneurs 3 times. Who are entrepreneurs, and, like, how I'm looking at this generation and I'm thinking, and I'm coming from a perspective of, like, I do need to take things off my plate, and so I'm trying to find good talent. and I had a I basically accepted. I had a younger person accept an internship, and I don't remember the date it was supposed to start, but they basically said, "Hey, can I start 3 weeks late?" And I was like, "Oh, what for?" I'm thinking like someone just died or something.
Mm-hmm.
They said, I've had a really hard semester and I need to take some time for self-care. And I said, that's dope, but absolutely not. This is like a 6-week. It's like a 6-week internship. You're gonna work. It just doesn't work. So I think it's just funny, and I wonder like what the future of, like, we know hustle culture is not being exposed. We know that there's sort of this anti-hustle culture, especially on the internet, on YouTube. But somebody has to work, and somebody has to be innovative, and somebody has to come up with all the these Chat GTP and whatever. SpaceX, all these things have to. The world has to continue to not only to sustain itself, but we have to continue to be innovative as a species. So it's like, how do you? I just think about this next generation, and I really do wonder: do they have the will and the capacity to like do things?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I think
no disrespect.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is where we start drawing hard lines, right? Hopefully, we don't get canceled. I'd say it's just a new term on the same old at the end of the day, right? Like, every generation thinks their thing is unique, and right as you get older, you think the new generation is different. There's always been lazy people. There's always been people that want to do the bare minimum. That's going to exist forever. We've got McJobs for those people, right? McJobs. At the end of the day, the founders and entrepreneurs out there aren't subscribing to some scripted life of mediocrity for all intents and purposes. They're looking for more, and they're gonna be outliers just like we are.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's gonna be any different. I think that the world just constantly terms these things different because it gives you a set of rules to live by, and that doesn't take a lot of mental capacity to just adopt rules and belief systems from other people, right? This is the challenge when you watch too much media is like you're just adopting the beliefs of what someone that's crafting it wants you to believe, and no tinfoil hat here, but well, at least not in this conversation. But it's just the general reality is like there's going to be a lot of people that go towards certain trend lines, and the new generation is lazy. It's always been mostly lazy people, right? Like, if you choose to look there. There will be people that choose to look at, and you talk about all these events in the world and all the chaos going. There's going to be the people in the world that don't necessarily, I mean, I'm not saying ignore world events and geopolitical issues, but what relative impact do they have on you, and what amount of, control over that do you have in your life, and how much do you let it affect you, and what amount of it do you pull into your identity? As you kind of explain, people using all of the world's issues to change their lifestyle, I would say that's just convenient because they were looking for it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want negative things, it's a button click away. It's a phone lift away. I mean, it's so accessible to see the negative in the world that if you are looking for it, no doubt you can hit pay dirt.
You'll find it
in fractions of a second.
We might need to edit this part out, but I mean, I guess I'll preface it by saying most of my career was in politics, and it was in social, it was like social advocacy. So I didn't just attend marches. I organized marches. I organized rallies, thousands of people showing up, press. And I'm proud of that because I think that the issues that we were working on were very important. And so when I look at what's going on in the Middle East and Ukraine and elsewhere, I've seen my friends turn into people I don't recognize. And it's scary because you said something that stuck out to me. You said it quickly, but in passing, but people take on these issues and make it part of their identity. And they are like, I have friends who are literally who are suffering because of the war in Palestine. They're constantly posting explicit content. Honestly, like we don't have to get into the politics around it, but I think seeing dead children constantly, seeing explosions every single day, and doom scrolling is having a real detrimental impact on people. And people are taking on this identity. And so they're taking on the ills of the world as their own. And then they get mad at you when you're not posting that shit. And that's why I prefaced it by saying I've already done that. I have my own views that I will not share, but I'm not doing all that because not because I don't support one side or the other, but because I understand the impact of what we ingest
Right.
physically and emotionally and visually that it has on you. And it's just like, for example, when for example, like this podcast that we're on right now. All of my algorithm is basically, a mixer, such and such, Sony cameras, and how to design a podcast and how to interview somebody. So it's because I became immersed in it, and I almost became obsessed. And I took on so many different ideas and looking at other podcasts. Well, how does Joe Rogan talk to his guys? Oh, it's more conversational than interviewee. Well, how does the Diary of CEO, and I realized I had to shut all of that out because I was losing myself before I even started this thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it goes for business too. In 2024, you hear YouTube University because there are people who we know who are doing well and don't have any formal training, and they're on YouTube. But it could become I think it's how you use the tool, right? And it can become completely detrimental to you. And I think it also can bolster innovation and ideas, but it also can keep you from whatever it is you have already.
Yeah.
To executing your own creativity.
Yeah, that's certainly a big challenge for a lot of people too, experienced and new. Just to tag that note, the Israel Palestine wars, the Ukrainian Russian wars, like this stuff is really terrible, and there's a lot of bad that goes on in the world. And I'm not saying that again that should be trivialized or ignored, but if you and I shouldn't tag it with but and. If you have no relative effect, how much of it do you put? There's one thing to support and want things to change, and I want them to change too. But if your entire life is enveloped that, what are you doing also to the people around you, right? Are you not spending time with your family? Are you creating fear in them as well and your friends? Are you pushing your support system out because of hardened beliefs on certain things? Where does that leave you? Where does that leave everybody? It starts to divide people and divide them up more and more. And we know you conquer, societies by dividing them up and isolating them because it's easier to fight one than fight many. Yes. And that's a big challenge in all this. And again, we've done a lot of support things for the different causes in the world, but like there's only so much we can do from here. And I think one of the best things that people can do is continue pushing innovation and supporting their friends and doing things locally, right? If everybody was working at their local level, helping the people around them, even their family and friends directly, and then extended and volunteering. We do volunteering every quarter, to go out and help other people. And it's like, imagine if that took hold as a mass idea, right? Yeah. And how quickly the world would change in theory. If that was the case. And that's to say there are a lot of people that are already doing that. And I love seeing people that are out doing that for their communities and doing that for their families. I think that it's just gotten further from reality because of the push of social media and how addicting screens are, that it's become very easy to I can pay for ads and I could create a Facebook and social media campaign just in my local area. And I could spend a certain amount of money on it and create an idea just based on that, that took hold. And marketing is extremely powerful these days because we have those tools and are accessible to everybody. YouTube is as well. On the content side, I think that's a big thing people deal with too. I always, whenever I'm on stage speaking about certain topics, at the end, I'll usually say something like, there's no more information, right? This is it. Don't go looking for more information. Take this and go execute, because it's a huge issue that I see more consistently with new founders than experienced ones. But they'll get into this loop of thinking they just need a little bit more information. Yeah. They just need to find something else. All of that becomes its own distraction. The best teacher in the world is experience and execution. All you need to get started is, you want to start a podcast studio, go use some cameras, borrow, rent, etc. Use the data, use the feedback to figure out where you go from there. I'm not saying you don't have to research things, but do you need to research every minute detail? No, because in the meantime, your competitor is not doing that likely, and they're just going out and executing and getting more experience with their real use case, and they're putting their value out, they've already got time on their side, right? They've been out for a year now, and you're still waiting, looking up the details on YouTube and trying to figure out how to create a business card, and you don't have your first customer, right? Like nobody needs your card. They just need your phone number. They need to pay you to do what you got to do. Too many people get locked in the analysis paralysis stage, and even then, once they've gotten started, they'll get stuck in that as a way to avoid work. If you want a way to avoid work, like negativity, there are reasons everywhere if you so choose to look for them. And it's super important. Focus. If you've ever seen anybody take a stratospheric rise in business, you'll realize that it's because they had laser-like focus, right? Our energy, if you look at it as a light, right? A lot of people will basically use it as a floodlight, right? So they've got all of this energy going out in every direction. I've got 10 different businesses. I'm doing all this research and stuff. The guy that's winning is the guy that has narrowed that down into one lane, and it looks a lot more like a laser, right? And he's just executing on this one thing and iterating from there and going after that and not getting distracted by the shiny objects, pushing through any pain points of uncertainty or not knowing how to do things, or these customers are difficult. That's where a lot of people will break and go look for something else, or go, oh, this over here promises a better future. I'm going to go switch to that. If you push through that, you will get so much further down the road than anybody that's looking everywhere for some way to be distracted. It goes for that in business. It goes for that in your personal life as well.
Yeah, it's not like today. It's not like my grandfather who had a computer hardware business. I didn't know what the hell he did for years. He would take me along for rides, and I just know he did computers. But I come to find out he was doing computer hardware back in the day. And you can imagine how big those trucks were, because it was like 95.
Yeah.
But
big old machine.
He would always talk about focus, and I didn't quite understand, and having a focus, and I didn't understand what it was because it's not my personality, as you know. But yeah, man, it's like that. It's so hard to have a laser focus when you have the world at your disposal, where you can go to a YouTube and literally learn all about just cameras, right? And then you're obsessed with cameras for 2 weeks. Whatever it is you're trying to pursue. But how do you, when you're talking to your clients, how do you walk them through, or can you walk us through, like, what is your advice for staying focused?
How do you reshape that?
Yeah, keeping your focus.
I think an interesting point is, you just mentioned it's hard. That's a belief system at the end of the day, right? That internal language creates that. If you think it's hard, that's what you'll get, right? Our minds are really, really, they don't want to be, your mind doesn't want to believe, your brain doesn't want to believe your mind's a liar. So whatever belief you put in your head, your mind is going to constantly work to validate, right? That's how belief systems work. If this table's white, my mind is going to make sure that that's white. It's not going to think that you'd have to be schizophrenic to get a different idea. So that's actually one of the foundations, right? Is examine how you actually talk to yourself. Your internal thoughts become basically your thoughts on how things go, which turn into your belief systems, right? Which are much more hardened and ingrained in your operating system. Your beliefs, and this is a Tony Robbins quote, but it runs my life. Your beliefs become your reality. If you believe that focus is hard, your mind is going to work constantly to make sure that is true. And that is kind of, again, you're setting yourself behind. So that's a core piece of it, right? Is aligning your belief systems to make sure that, like, what you're doing is the right thing. It's easy to focus on. If you don't at least start with that, you're never going to make it. Beyond that, once you have the right idea, it's a lot of education around why we do what we do that also helps you focus. We are path of least resistance as a default psychological mechanism, right? So there's an 80-20 at play, an 80% and a 20%. 80% of everything we do is avoiding pain. The 20% of everything we do, and sometimes less, is gaining some sort of pleasure, right? So going after something that and expending effort to get pleasure out of something. But the 80% of what we do is that pain avoidance, right? Which this is how we explain it easily. Why do you go to work every day? If you work a job, why do you go to your work every day? Well, it's because it might not be because you like it, but what you're avoiding is not getting paid. What you're avoiding is not being able to pay your rent. What you're avoiding is looking like a loser to your parents or your friends because you didn't go to work, right? We do the majority of what we do to avoid pain. The reason why this matters to understand and conceptualize in business, or not conceptualize, but just know and learn and utilize, is this is the same thing that shiny object syndrome stems out of, right? Which is a very common word in our realm. When you're working on very complex things, or they could be simple and they could just simply be hard. Again, entrepreneurship's hard. Building a business is very, very difficult. What'll happen is you'll be on your path, and two major things. Either you hit just a general pain point where something is difficult to do, or you have a lack of clarity. So you basically, there's a foggy unknown in front of you. Both of those are relative pains in our minds. So our first mechanism is to look the other way. Where's an easier path? Where's something where I can get a sense of achievement today? This even happens on a minute level and day to day, right? When someone knows you have to take 4 hours to write a proposal, you get up in the morning and you're tired. What are you actually going to do first? You're going to hit the easiest path to achievement, which is your email.
Yep.
And you're going to go, I'm actually going to co-opt all of these issues first before I ever get to this thing, because the reality is I don't really want to work on this. And boop, there you go. Your focus is gone, right? And it's like, so when you talk about it's hard, it's a matter of alignment. If you know that you're liable to do that, you can craft your days to make sure that you actually avoid that. One of the things that we do with some of the founders that I work with is prioritizing their most critical functions, which usually is business development, the very first hour of their workday. So you go do your morning routine, and before you hit your email, before you do any other work, your first hour is, for most, is some amount of business development. If you don't have a business development team, obviously, or sales teams. If you do have those already, it's what is your most impactful work, right? Let's do that up front before we look at the emails, before we add in the chaos of the day. This also backs out to like what you're even intending on doing weekly. And it's a big backbone of the program that I run is on Sundays, not on Mondays when you've been to your office and seen your email or got on your phone and seen your email and decided I want to put out all these fires, is you on Sunday, when your head is a lot more clear and coming off rest, is actually being intentional about your week. What am I going to accomplish? Not what are all these tasks I'm going to do, right? But what am I going to actually deliver this week? And if I can just narrow that down to a few things, week over week, I can execute. But because I have clarity on those things, they become easier to do. I'm not trying to do 30 things this week.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do these 3 things that matter.
I never do that. I should
most
admit,
don't.
Yeah, but I admit I really, and this is why we're having this conversation, because this is helping me, and I hope it helps other people. I'm thankful I have the self-awareness to know this. I go by feeling. I mean, because so far feeling has been the thing that it's worked. And I will just wake up on a Monday and be like, okay, I know I have these things, but how am I feeling now? Yeah. And I just kind of just, and so my life, not just my work life, becomes chaotic, because then it's like, hey, my wife, hey, Derrick, don't forget, you got to take our daughter to gymnastics. And I'm like, crap, I didn't plan out my day. Oh, hey, I can't, but I'm not going to say I can't. I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. Because of dad guilt and because I want to see her, and something else falls by the wayside, from work. And it is just not a way to live.
It's exhausting. I mean, I feel for people. Like I said, it's one of the more common things that I see. Obviously, what I see is there's commonalities because I'm in a specific line of work. But that is, again, I think it's shouldered on the backside of overwhelm, right? Is like I'm just here to put out fires all the time, and it's like, unfortunately, if you allow the world to control what you focus on, that's not going to serve you very well, right? So I want to make sure that I'm filling in my blank line of purpose every day of like, what do I need to deliver to this world first and foremost before I let that enter? And just that realignment can make a massive difference in someone's focus and generally their energy levels for their work. Yeah. Because it's like the momentum and progress you feel from being intentional and delivering on those big items flows to all the small stuff. Yes. And that's when you start to see people, when people talk about this guy's clicked in, that's how you get to that point, right? Is like, what you're going to deliver. you've taken the 10 minutes of preventative maintenance, right, up front, right? So I don't have time for that. That's a lie. You're very familiar with the whole gym trope with that too. I don't have time for the gym. That's a lie. It's not a priority for you, right? You don't care. So you're just going to make sure that you don't have time. It's the same thing with being intentional about your week. It only takes 10 or 20 minutes to do. What are you going to do otherwise in that time on Sunday evening or Sunday morning, right? Nothing.
Yep.
But man, could you set yourself up for an entire week to just deliver and execute? Absolutely. It's not difficult, right? It just takes a little bit of thought.
And that can make some people angry. I mean, and I use the gym. The one thing, so I've definitely improved. So like I've adopted the whole like do the hard thing first, and it trickles down in the rest of my life and all the rest of my smaller assignments. But just the gym, I use it as an example. I have my wife and I together have 4 kids. We have 2 under 6 or 6 and 3. Our days are absolutely insane. And not to be like those moms on Instagram who are like, I got 17 kids and I'm still going, but dude, like you make the time for the things you want to do. So I don't know what I don't know the latest Netflix movie. I don't know. My team didn't make it to the AFC playoffs. I wouldn't have known because I hadn't been watching them all season, but I caught that one game because I wanted to watch it. And it really is like, what life do you want to live? Not what kind of life do you want to have, but what kind of life do you want to live today? And if you truly look at the life you want to live, and it ends up being a certain thing, you got to do the things every single day in order to live that life. And I think for me, I like to tell stories. So like I come from Harlem, New York. I did not grow up with we damn near didn't have a spoon, let alone a silver spoon. But I had a mother who was always, I think ahead of her time in terms of, thinking about what we're talking about now versus like the 90s and 80s, who always said, she would tell us, you look around your neighborhood, and we lived in Harlem in the 80s and 90s, crack epidemic. I would go to school with, literally crack vials all over the ground. She's like, look at your environment. This is your reality. This is your reality now, but this doesn't have to be your reality in your mind. You don't have to live here in your mind. Think about the kind of person you actually are. You don't belong here. And so from an early age, I'm like, my thing was like, how am I going to get out of here? Cool, I'm going to go to college. That was my thing. I didn't really care to go to college. I just wanted to go because I knew that was a key. But what she taught my brothers and I is that you live in the mind, that you can create your reality. Not that you can, if you have cancer, you can get rid of cancer, but
by thinking about it.
By thinking about it, but that your general state of being, you can control it, and that will play out, and it will serve you in different ways throughout your life. So I think like this, I love this part of the conversation because it's so profound. And I think that when you talk like this, sometimes you have people who say, well, what about, the whataboutism? And, but I think that we see examples every single day of people who just live in a different realm. They're not on this plane of existence, who are super positive and don't have the best life, but are content. For me, that is spirituality. For me, that's why I have to get up early. And one thing even if I don't have a great routine, like I said, my morning routine is on point, bro. Because I'm up and I'm meditating and I'm praying. So for me, it's spirituality. For another person, it may just be, affirmations and, a gratitude practice. But I know, dude, it's like whether you're an entrepreneur, or you go to work every day, you work your ass off, you got to do something for yourself. It's something I tell my wife to all the time. Because my wife is the reason why I can do anything is because my wife is a wonderful mother. But she doesn't take time for herself outside of the gym. She makes sure she goes to the gym every single day. So that's her thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of like mindset, because the gym now for her the gym for us is rote. We just go. But
she's
working on mindset. Like, how do I see myself? How do I see these situations?
Yeah.
In order to get to where I'm trying to go. So.
Yeah. I think going back to the bit about your mom, I think it's something that I'm sure is in your gratitudes every morning, because it's so incredible to hear that your mom had the perspective outside of her world and her environment, and she gifted you and your siblings that same belief, because for oftentimes that's all it really takes, right? If you look at, and again, I'm no expert, but if you look at any faction of society, right, and the way that people live, and potentially how Harlem was back then, right, is people, again, path of least resistance. You'll adopt the easiest belief system that's closest to you and most influential, which is almost always your family or influential people in your family. And the thing is if nobody gets an outside perspective, that family belief system gets passed down from generation to generation, which is why people stay there ultimately.
Yes.
And it only takes someone saying that's so close to you to say, it doesn't have to be like this. And partly why we're doing what we're doing, right? Someone's going to hear us talking about this and be like, holy smokes, I never had the perspective that like it could be different. I just thought that's the way life was, and that life has happened to me. It's not happening for me, right? And that's a Tony quote too that I live by. I think it's amazing to think that way. It's like life isn't happening to you. You can change that. But if you've never heard that, I can't fault you for thinking the way that you think, because how would you know that otherwise?
Exactly.
Right? And it takes, when people talk about, I want to be a more positive world, then talk about it more, right? Then be that person, embody it, be a leader, and people will gravitate towards you. That means being resilient, because the change alone is going to create fear in people, right? But if you push through that because you want to be that person and you resist or outlast the negative feedback from that, not only will you live in a better state more often, you will start attracting the right people. And at bare minimum, you'll clarify who you need to grow away from, because you're going to notice that some people just want to dig their heels in, and you've got to make that decision on whether or not you want what that's worth to you. Leaving those connections. If you want to live a more positive life, it's got to start from you, because at bare minimum, that's the only thing you're in control of anyway, right? I can't control. I love for everybody around me to be my best friend. I'm not in control of them, and nor do I want to be, right? So the only thing I'm in control is what my state is like and how I look at the world. I get to choose that, and what's the outcome? I have tons of beautiful friends and family
Thank you.
that I rely on, support. Yes, you included. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on this podcast. But it's just so true. And I think that, again, putting out this type of content, man, that's going to penetrate someone that really needs to hear that. It's going to change their life, and good for them. If that's all it takes, like, this is easy, right? This is easy to put that out.
Dude, I'm doing this podcast without, a real plan. I'm going off feeling. I just know that I can sit and listen to people talk. I enjoyed speaking. I love just getting to the point that I made about like not having to experience a thing because someone else has already experienced it and can give you their experience. I love just hearing people talk. And I think that, I just think that, I hope that this becomes a platform where people get ideas, spurs ideas, receive ideas, and also just like, I just want people to get something out of this. And I think that I've gotten a lot of this conversation. And I think that, I thought we were going to talk about straight up, just coaching, but I think that, it's the accountability part of it. It's like, we are accountable for our own lives. It's easy to say that with I don't have a full belly, but a full belly, a house over my head. My children are safe right now. But I've been in a place where I didn't know where I was going to get my next meal. And it wasn't like it was a long time ago either. It was close enough for me to still have those hunger pains.
Yeah,
man.
Still feel it. Yeah.
But even then I can look back and say, I've made certain decisions that based on fear and off those circumstances that I actually didn't have to make, and also focus on things that I shouldn't have been focused on. I didn't have to. I could have been productive in this area as opposed to scrolling the internet, or whatever. But man, thank you for coming, brother.
Man. It's been awesome. I love it.
Dope, bro. I love this. Thank you.
We'll have a second and a third and a fourth, because there's so much we didn't go over. But absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing here. I love the stories that you told too. I always take from that, as I say, I always learn from everybody that I talk to. and getting different perspectives, I think is amazing. And yeah, man, congrats on getting this thing kicked off.
Thanks, man. Thank you. All right, bro. Thanks so much, man.